Greetings, friends in Twitchland. I had some real latency problems a few minutes ago with Twitch. My speed was fine, but I was clocking in at something like 100 kbs, which obviously is unacceptable. But I think that was a Twitch problem and not a my local network. 'Cause my local network was giving me quite good speed at the same time. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Getting set up here. Next couple days are again a little chaotic with some things that I have to attend to. So I might be having some reduced streaming time, but I'm gonna try to keep on schedule as best as I can. So, start with my usual speech from the Tomes, Twitch TV from the Tomes. If you're watching it right now, you know where it's at. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to go over to Twitch and subscribe. And make sure, if you are a subscriber and you'd like to stay updated, that you select notifications enabled. I've been hearing that notifications for when I go live or when I post updates have not been coming through email, but I don't think it's just me. I've been hearing this from a lot of streamers recently, or seeing it posted by a lot of streamers recently. So I'll assume that again that's a Twitch deal, not a from the Tomes deal. But just to be sure, you can have it enabled. Let's see. If you are watching this on Twitch, feel free to go over to Fox and Board Games. I'm just here looking at a couple notes I got from people regarding getting updates and not getting updates. FoxandBoardGames.com is the landing pad for all this. Got a new blog post up over the weekend. Finally, in the past several weeks when I've been saying I should put a new blog post up, I finally just went and did it. And let's see what else. We have Fox and Board Games on Twitter and Facebook. And as always, thanks a lot for liking, subscribing, and following what I'm doing here. This is, why I'm doing this is to keep a presence as I create this game and run this game and update it. Let people see what I'm doing and let folks give feedback and brainstorm along with me. Hey, there's Peach. How's it going? How did what go, Peach? Good to see you. How'd your solar go? The play test, I guess you're referring to how to go. It went fairly well. It's interesting. It's a different run on the different take on the game. The characters are none of them are really, at least frontally, combat oriented. It's a murder mystery. If you've followed along with anything I've posted, yeah. No, I know. I think what I mentioned, I had it looked. I looked at having it done here, and it was just we. That's a long story that I don't need to get into. I don't need to get into on my Twitch stream, but basically, we're at the point we're not sure. You know, we eventually want to sell this house, and yes, solar might increase its value, but we'd have to put in the whole propane system for the heating. It would be to really convert it the way we'd want to would be an astronomical amount of money. If we were going to stay here the rest of our lives, spending it would not be an issue, but I don't think either of us really think we want to. Who knows? We may end up being here, but um, I've really wanted to do solar and propane for a while because we get electric outages here. Like literally, the wind blows down the street and the power goes out. And yes, I have a generator, but it doesn't do the whole house. It just does the essentials. And having it set up with solar and propane would be perfect. But frankly, if I'm going to invest in that, I'd rather wait until perhaps there is the possibility that we're going to move into some place that we're going to stay. If it's in the United States, it's very likely it will be north in New England areas or upstate New York or central New York, in which case we might absolutely need solar and generators and propane. And if we fly the coop and move to Europe permanently, it won't really matter because we probably won't own a place. So yeah, MA. I mean, some states are so progressive. PA isn't terrible. PA is terrible. PA is terrible in terms of being progressive politically, but as far as solar, they actually do have some. They do have some things that they supplement, but not a lot. Like there's the family in Germany has solar, and it costs a lot to put in. The government subsidized parts of it, and then they get paid for the amount of electricity. They get tax reductions for the amount of electricity they produce, to the point that one year it basically was free, and ended up being it evened out to be basically free electricity. And electricity is becoming very expensive in Europe, largely due to the Ukraine situation, and the energy situation. So yeah. Well, I'm glad your solar got in. Yeah, I saw that. I was like, I don't think PJ's gonna make it on tonight. Last week's chat was quiet. Last week's nighttime chat was quiet on the buy-in. I know a couple of people were really interested. I don't know if people maybe didn't know what to expect from it. So I don't know. I haven't come up with something for this week yet. But I have just stuff I have to do every morning this week, so my schedule's gonna be a little erratic. Yeah, you're leasing the panels. I think the Germans had to pay for the panels, but I think a lot of that was still subsidized, and they actually paid to have some come out and do all the estimates and all that. So again, it's just such a different structure and how things are done. You're probably hearing a dog who's convinced he's digging on the carpet. He's trying to make himself comfortable. Burrow into the carpet. I don't know what he's doing. I want to say it's because he's old and crazy, and it is, but he's always done that. So yeah, so how'd the game go? The game went really well. So it's people who played. Everybody has played some version of it. Tom has played it the most. Curzon has played it the most. Oh yeah, get caught up. Yeah, the buy-in stream wasn't big. I'm trying to come up with this week's topic. I don't know. I'll probably just keep it something really more general. Buy-in's really specific. I mean, I think we had a little bit of interesting conversation on it. It was kind of redundant to some of our other conversations, but I didn't have a lot of extra input, so I'd be curious to see what people think. I'm gonna revisit the culture stream at some point too, because I know some people missed that, like yourself, and had really interesting things they wanted to talk about. So I'm at a point I can probably talk a little bit more about the playtest. Now the playtest, see, I don't know if I can because I know a few people who are going to watch this want to play a version of it. Basically, though, the playtest went fairly well. We, as I started to say, we had several players who hadn't played any recent version of this. In fact, I think Justin, it was his first time playing any version of it because he missed the one short in-person game I ran previously. We spent about the first hour kind of just going back over, like, okay, let's look at everybody's characters, make sure everything's in order. People had some questions, so actually some good questions because they caught some of my errors in my documents, my game documents, which is perfect because this is part of why we're doing this. And then we sat down for 4 hours, 3 hours, and played. And this scenario is a lot of social interaction and investigation to start, at least. And it's interesting because the players had very hey, listen, you should be getting audio. Other people are hearing it. Make sure you're turned up. I know I've had a couple people who had audio adjustments. I'm getting signal. PJ can hear me. And Twitch is weird. When I tried logging on right at 1, and I basically had to log out. Yep, loud and clear. Loud and or clear. I'm both. Loud and clear. I had to restart the stream several times because the latency was so bad. Audio is good for Curzon. It could just be taking a second to catch up and everything to get running on your end, Wasan. So, yeah, I guess I could scroll right down. Again, I still can't show too much on screen because of one of the players is sitting right here. So I can just recap it a little bit more thoroughly. I don't even see my other group, Blake and Neil. They're going to want to play a version of this, so I can't even talk too much about several of the reveals that happen throughout the course of the game. That's what kind of stunts my working on this at this point, because everything I'm going to work on now for this scenario is fairly sensitive topically. So I'm just going to pull up another document here. But overall, it went well. It was satisfying. It was very satisfying to see this. It was a different kind of scenario, as I said, and that was something I think all of us had to get used to. Person's walking away. Yeah, but if I don't know how much Blake watches these later. I know Neil watches them later. They might see something that would be a spoiler for them when they play through it. But in summary, I can also just talk a little bit about how my process and setting everything up, because again, it is a very different kind of scenario. I just put up another panel for now. Let me just scroll down and see if there's a point I can look at on the scenario document that won't completely screw things up for anybody. So I had to really organize this scenario very differently than what I do, say, a traditional location-based scenario. Now, first of all, I guess I'll show this off, because I'm very proud of this. I'm very happy with it. Image, browse. Yeah, it was good seeing Curzon playing in person instead of online. It was great to have some of my regular group members, Justin, Mel, Diana, all back, because we haven't actually played as a group now in a couple months again. No, can't show that one. Can't show that image. That's an incoming player aid. So here's the map of the city that I made over the weekend, actually yesterday morning. Now this is not, I mean, some of you know I actually have art training, visual arts training. So this to me is a very rough sketch of the map. The printout that they got is not even colored in. I can talk about this and show this. Tomorrow, I'm thinking about. So one thing that came up topically quite a bit on this in this during this particular scenario was the gods and goddesses of the territory of the region, because they're in a city that's essentially controlled by a theocracy. So there was a lot of discussion about that, and I have a few of the deities detailed, but I don't have a significant amount detailed. So I'm thinking about going in and spending a little more time with that, not only for the Rubari and Magrelin, but for the rest of the cultures too. Actually, I'm probably better off sharing this instead of as an background image, as a work share. Now that I think about it, let's do that. I got some viewers today. Everyone's coming back to life. Last week was kind of thin. I was like, everybody forgot about me while I was away. This is a tough time of year too. Like I know we're already basically booking up for like the next 3 weeks through Halloween, and then beyond. For Diana's birthday, we're already making plans, kind of like what we're gonna do that weekend. So it's definitely the time of year that a lot of people get really busy. As I said, my notifications haven't been working. Like people have been saying they didn't know I was going online. Supposedly there were some fixes to that over the weekend, hopefully. Again, it's a service I can't really complain too much about. Let me pull up the map, and then I'll just share it as a work share. Work share. Where are you, PDF? I just saw a note come through. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing, is that I know a lot of people who are artists or creatives who are working at home are tuning in, which is cool for me. All right, there we go. So this way I can at least adjust it, scale it, scroll here to show you stuff. But yeah, so like this to me is honestly a very rough map. This is not production quality, obviously. It's done in about an hour and a half in Photoshop yesterday morning. But it's a city-based adventure. So by its very nature, it runs very differently than like a dungeon-based adventure or a location-based adventure. And that they kind of started with this open city realm that I gave them background info on. I can share that too in a moment. And they start out at this bath that's over here in the border of these are the ziggurats. The bath I said I believe is right about here. It was an old bath that they were scheduled to meet an old acquaintance at. And I think anybody who plays role-playing games, as soon as everybody gets together to meet the old acquaintance, things go wrong. And of course they did. And then from there, it's trying to figure out the mystery of what's gone wrong and why it's gone wrong and how to fix it. And one of the challenges I had was tying everybody to the scenario. And this goes in with the buy-in that I talked about a little bit Wednesday night. By the way, if anyone's got an idea for a topic for this Wednesday night, let me know. Okay, they're all sitting down to play this game I'm writing. They've all made these characters. None of them are going to say, at least none of my group are going to say, oh, well, my character wouldn't pursue this or not be interested in this. Like, I know they won't. At least these players won't. So, but I still wanted to tie in how they knew this person, why it was relevant to them, why, if there was a problem, they should be compelled to investigate it. And I gave them, I think, all fairly brief, very brief, like when we sat down at the game, brief reasons to stay engaged, which was cool. I everybody went along with it. You know, like I said, I didn't really think anybody was gonna say, "Oh no, my character wouldn't do that." You know, so they had to follow a series of clues, and I think it was pretty focused. I kept it very focused so that they did not just meander around this city. I mean, it's not quite like, well, first of all, as a writer and as a game master, I don't have every single possible location of interest in this city detailed yet. I just don't. I haven't had the time to do it yet. And there's been some talk, and I've talked to Curzon, I've talked to a few other people about how to go about setting something like that up. Like if you purchase a game book and it has several cities mentioned in it, like how much information do you put in? And what I've decided is what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief overview of each city, its population, its political structure, its legal structure, its mores, its customs, and then in this case, this is the city with a strict caste system in place. So they've had to negotiate that, and I sent them out a primer, like how to role play in a caste system, right? Because this is something we don't do in most fantasy RPGs. You know, most fantasy RPGs are very meritocracy, right? They're very modern capitalist in the way that they present the culture. And the reality is, most ancient cultures were not at all like this. You know, they did not function at all socially like our world, and they did not even socially function like we think most medieval or fantasy worlds would. You know, they didn't. Class and caste and education and birthright or lack of birthright were all huge throughout most of human history, and in parts of the world today they still are. So I had to really kind of prime. Now obviously it's a fantasy game, obviously they're the heroes, obviously I'm not going to have them treated like hell for the 10 weeks that we play this or whatever, because their characters aren't high cast. Like that wouldn't be fun for anybody. That reminds me of let's see. Well, right, when they actually mean something, and not they're right. There's so that was always the tough thing in like early Vampire, the whole boon system. Like they tried to establish this currency among vampires that actually meant something, but most players were like, well, if I don't keep my boon, who cares? You know, because that's how they act in today's everyday world. You know, that when they're not vampires, they don't have a 2,000-year-old vampire they just pissed off. And in this case, like pissing off a noble or one of the priests is a big deal. It can mean your head. Like there was an opportunity for Justin last night to steal a very valuable item, and he really was going through that, and I said just remember, first of all, your character is not even casted. He's basically an immigrant to this city. I said this item belongs to a noble. Like it's very unique. You know, it was a unique item that belonged to a noble that he had an opportunity to steal, and he had it. He had it on his person. And I said, just though, think about if you get caught with this. He's like, I'm gonna get my blank cut off, aren't I? I'm like, yeah, or worse. I mean, well, I mean that's pretty bad, but yeah, you might just get killed, you know. And in this culture, it can't be, oh, he fast talks the guards, I let him slide, you know, because it just doesn't work like that. So luckily, I have a group that is interested in becoming invested in that level of role play in this world. Now, again, if they were in a different city, if they were in the bandit city, the free city, that's a couple hundred kilometers to the west, they could do whatever they want. You know, then it is more Conan, Might makes right, and the guy with the biggest sword or the most magic can rule. And that could be where the characters end up. I don't know. And I do have a scenario set in that city that I'm working on. I have a scenario set in each of the major cities. One is in Nakarth that I've already played, and I'm gonna start running online, I hope. And then there's this one, which is a little longer scenario, which is more about the political and the social interactions within the city. But yeah, so they follow these clues, and they followed the clues pretty well. They did throw me a curveball, which was cool. They kind of jumped the gun on one possible solution to an immediate question. There were two. I got to see divination magic used for the first time, which was interesting. I hadn't seen it used yet. I got to see the overpower magic system work, where you push your magic to try to achieve the next highest level, and it ended up with a significant amount of damage being done to the caster. Most of it was temporary, like fatigue damage, but some of it was permanent. Well, permanent till they heal it, which in this game it's pretty easy to heal. But it was cool kind of seeing that used right off the bat, like the situation, like kind of the opening scenario. Diana's character was like, I think I really need to try to use my healing, but I can only do minor healing at this level. I was like, okay, well, go ahead, go to the next level. I tried it, failed miserably, and took damage. And I'm like, okay, that's how it's supposed to work. That's if you pull it off, it's great. It's like superhero power, right? If you don't, you know, if you don't, then you take damage. And that's kind of how I thought a sword and sorcery magic system should work. Not saying, oh, you're not that level, you can't cast that spell. Oh, yeah, you can cast the spell. You can try casting the spell. She got no successes too, so the spell didn't even work. Because it is possible for the spell to work and still take all the damage from the magical backlash. So I mean, it would have been though epic if that even two successes at this high level would have been fairly spectacular, and it would have changed the course of the adventure very early on, at least in terms of the amount of information they could get right away. So that would have been interesting. But it was also cool seeing the system tried and a massive failure. And I'm like, okay, yeah, works like I thought it would. So first right out of the gate, we had that. Then after that, they decided to kind of shortcut one or two clues and do some investigation that some on-site investigation that I didn't quite expect them to do. They went and broke into an office, a warehouse office in the middle of the night. And I was like, huh, okay. Didn't really see that one coming, but it worked. They didn't get much out of it, but it was cool to see them do it and try a couple of the new skills and new gifts they had. So that was pretty cool. They progressed. So I was joking around with people who weren't playing the game earlier. I said I've got about 23 pages written. I'm estimating they're going to get through the first 4 or 5 tonight, and that's about where they got, and that's okay, and that's fine because it will eventually all be used with this group or with another group. It's going to be published, so it didn't hurt to do the extra work. And I'm just glad that it seemed like everyone had fun. Like they're still kind of getting their minds around the mechanical elements. But I don't think that's insurmountable. By the end of the night, I think everybody was kind of getting it. And I don't think it's an overly complex system. I mean, I don't even think it's as complex as D&D 5th Ed, which I've joked around that I'm shocked D&D 5th Ed is the benchmark for role playing because it's not particularly streamlined. Well, okay, it's streamlined. It's not particularly simplistic mechanically, I don't think. Especially if you use magic. I would play a paladin. I played a paladin for a couple sessions over the summer and I was like, I'm never going to remember everything this character can do, which is okay. Now, guaranteed, I only played it for maybe 4 or 5 sessions, and I guess if I played it for half a year, then I would feel differently. But even as far as that sort of setup, I don't see this game being all that complicated. I certainly don't see it being as complicated as some of the really crunchy games, or even 5th Ed. Definitely not Pathfinder. I think Pathfinder's got a lot more to worry about and work on, which, as I've always said, I like Pathfinder. I don't think that's a problem, but you got to have people who really want to do that. Let's see. So let's see where I'm at. Yeah, playing that's so again that goes back to all our discussions on culture. Maybe I can revisit. Maybe I can revisit that this week, class and culture. See, because I know it was a pretty light week that week. A lot of people couldn't make it. By class, I mean like social class, and different cultures and how that impacts the player experience and the game master experience. So I guess I could briefly overview the city that I've laid out. We've got the city center is very Babylonian. These sprawling gardens, the scriptorium, an observatory. Those are kind of the key points. These are kind of these bastions of civilization that have been intact through, wars and demonic invasion and all these other things that are typical in these settings and that cause the rise and fall of cultures in these settings. Then there's these rows of temples and some administrative buildings around the main square, and this is kind of the main city square. Then over here is, I think, or I already mentioned, you have the ancient ziggurats that were a temple complex that are now nominally used, but they're not really used in their original function. And some of the old temple buildings through here. No, when asked about kind of the feel of the city, I describe it as kind of Babylonian, Near Eastern, but I see the sort of array of mysticism very much like Darkshire or Calcutta or some of the Indian cities where there's just this massive array of gods, goddesses, and expressions thereof throughout the city. And they seem to always be evolving, as new people come in and as new culture, new generations, come into the city and change things that these temples and these places of worship and the religions themselves are these kind of constant evolution. That's kind of how I see this. Though there is this theocratic cult order, mystic order that is in charge of pretty much everything. They do it fairly quietly. And that's the Blasi Rosette, and that's the Shining Order, and that's their chapter house right here. Then there's, the High Guards house, barracks, things like that. And again, I don't have any of this labeled, and this is all so raw. It's barely a sketch to me. I really like making maps, and I'd really like to take the time to make really nice maps myself. I may or may not have the time to do that. I may have to get someone else to do that. But these are kind of the houses of the royalty over here. And as usual, each one of these does not represent one building, or this is a general formation of plots of land, blocks of houses, some larger estates that might take this up. But if you look over here at the scale, this is approximately 1 kilometer. Approximately maybe 12 or 15 centimeters or an inch or so on the map is 1 kilometer. So, obviously these houses aren't a kilometer long. These are just very generalized indicators of where there's open space versus where there's construction of some sort. And to give a general feel, I talked about this a little bit in my mapping video that's over on YouTube. That in this case, more than a specific detailed and exact layout, I wanted the map to put a map down in front of the players to just kind of point to where things are at and give them an idea of the feel of the different areas. This is kind of this internal centered cluster in the middle here. And then over here to the right is this, palatial sprawl like, but I want to say suburban. If there's going to be suburbia, now again, the royalty are living in suburbia. The nobles, the high priests, they're the ones that are living in the suburbia. And if there's anything that looks like a suburbia, this would be it. The rich merchants live in the suburbia over to the west. By the way, there's Oceanside west and north, like not right near the town. The town's in the middle of a swamp near a lake, and then you can travel to the seaside to the west and to the north. And then the north quarter is the slums. Basically, it's where the Mrostoya, the casteless, the invisibles in this society live, along with, of course, most of your criminal elements, some of your less savory immigrant culture or immigrant individuals from various cultures. So that's kind of your, if you want to find Mos Eisley or a similar kind of locale, or your typical kind of underworld, medieval or not medieval, but ancient world den. This is kind of where you would go. If you want to buy poisons, that's where you go. If you want someone killed, that's where you go to find the person to do it. So that's kind of this whole area right here. Now and again, I make it clear in the descriptions that this is much like today's modern city, quote unquote, slums or ghettos. Is all due to endemic poverty. It's due to these people who are born into this class or lack of caste, and can never move out. And they do the worst jobs in the city. They do the jobs and they're invisible. So again, they have no social or political rights, really. They are not slaves, but they often end up in a position of servitude, which is close to slavery. This city does not have a slave culture. There's no slave market. There's no, institutionalized slavery, but there are servants that are more or less owned. And it might not be as visibly oppressive as a true slave culture, but it's pretty much that. And that's where these people who aren't bound to another house end up living. And it's generational. And over to the west is the Vuchenkovek, and which means outsider land. So there's a lot of your kind of laborers and workers here who are Rubari, who are native, but are of the working class, the Rukaz, the laborer class. But it's also where a lot of the immigrants. Now, again, the whole backstory of the world is there was insert demonic infestation, magical cataclysm, etc., that caused massive population shifts. And this is the one city that remained more or less intact throughout and untouched throughout. So a lot of immigrants ended up here. So this is where your various cultures from other parts of the land have ended up and created basically the Lower East Side or the lower, or Lower Greenwich Village or something like that. It's kind of got that vibe that it's rough, but it's not, most people who live there are not necessarily criminal, but it is rough. It is working class. It's where you meet people who have their feet on the ground almost all the time. And that's where most of the characters come from or live near or inhabit that area. Nobody chose to play a noble. There are traits. There are gifts when you buy your traits initially for the characters. You can buy a noble station or a priestly station, depending on what culture you're from. So somebody could have done that. It would have been a very different game, though. Because what you would have access to in terms of information, in terms of privilege, and all the things that come with it, would be radically different than what the characters are now. They were mostly street level characters, which, in these games, I think that's pretty much common. Outside of maybe certain LARPs, I've never seen too many games, especially pen and paper, where everybody's like, I want to play the petty noble, or I don't really do anything. I have my retainers do everything. Would that be an interesting game in and of itself? And this would be an interesting world, interesting setting to do it in. Then to the south is the Necropolis. So this is a little different than your traditional burial grounds. What, because it's effectively below sea level, of course, I took a little bit of a hint from parts of the Indian subcontinent and New Orleans and places that done a little bit of research on, that there are very few below ground burials here due to the proximity to the tidal regions and the swamps. These are all big ceramic cylinders. Essentially, they're big clay ovens that bodies are put in and slow cooked to desiccation. Um, and this is not unknown in today's world. It's not incredibly common. But I decided that in this society, in this situation, this where they have this kind of this sense of grandeur and ostentatious nobility and celebrity priest class and, celebrity merchants, some people would want really giant tombs. But they're not really about building pyramids in this particular culture. Not anymore. The ziggurats are ancient. They're before this city was even here. There were these step pyramids here, and it's kind of sprung up around that in this initial center. Whereas these cylinders provide that opportunity. And thinking of some of the Victorian cemeteries or turn of the century great golden age cemeteries I've been in, like in upstate New York and New England, where there are these massive. PJ's probably got a few near his house. These massive, massive, monumental tombs. I know Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown. Even before Curzon lived up there, and we had gone over to the cemetery for a couple different events, Halloween and just tours and whatnot. We had been up there, and they're literally monumental structures. The modern version of the pyramid, the modern version of the imperial burial. So the necropolis are just these rows and these kind of outcroppings of these huge ceramic cylinders. Some are plain. I mean, some are small, that's big enough for one person to be put in, standing up. Some are multi-tiered and generational and huge. So that's kind of the approach I took with the necropolis here. So it's a kind of a different feel of a burial ground than what you would have found even in our own Roman era when they did burials, when they didn't do cremations. Now that of course is for people who actually have the money to do it. There's also swamp burials that the less 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 fortunate of birth in this culture engage in. That was my job yesterday. I was making up this map. Like I said, I'm hoping I have the time in the end projects to do obelisks all the way down. It is always about obelisks. Always about obelisks. With all the connotation. It's funny, so the band that I like quite a bit, Wardruna, was in DC Friday, and unfortunately we couldn't make it down to see it. But Einar Selvik, their main guy, he takes this picture selfie with the Washington Monument in the background, and he says, "It's Phallic Friday. Look at the giant." And it was really hilarious because again, he comes off as this really serious, dark guy, but then when you meet him, he's really not like that at all. He's very cool. It was just funny. There he is doing Phallic Friday with the obelisk in the background. It was hilarious with the Washington Monument in the background. Speaking of giant obelisks, the erection of America, the Washington Monument. So yeah, I guess it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about. It's funny that I hadn't really thought about that equation, but I guess these are kind of obelisk like the ceramic cylinders. I haven't really spent a lot of time detailing those yet, which I haven't gotten to it. But I do talk about a little bit about the necropolis and how it differs from say burial grounds and in this elsewhere in this world, but also elsewhere in our modern world. That was my job yesterday morning. let's see what else I do over the weekend. Saturday, I spent a lot of time working on the game itself. And like I said, I still can't show a lot of that because this is still in progress, and it is a scenario that other people are going to be playing through. So, I mean, I feel like I'm teasing. I'm like, oh yeah, I did all this work. We had this great game, but I kind of can't tell you much about it. Um, let's see. So the game's a lot about information gathering, and I think I've talked enough about it to say that it works on a challenge system, a challenge rating system. Let me find the work share. Pop that back over there. I guess I could show that. So now if I go back to the rules. You know, in most cases, things are challenge rating. You know, 7 is easy, average is 10, 12 is difficult, 15 unlikely, 18 plus is usually impossible. And the way it works is you roll a die pool based on an attribute, and to the results of those dice, you add a skill, a numeric modifier, a plus. Starting characters are anywhere to +8 if they have a cultural adjustment. Because again, they're all humans. There's no different fantasy races here. So some cultures do have, through upbringing and aptitude to certain skills. You know, like the Melek know how to ride for the most part. The Melek are the plainsmen, the horsemen. They're going to know how to. You know, if you take riding as a Melek, you get a +1 on it automatically, just simply because you have that to start. So that you can start with an 8 if you're a Melek. Most people can start with a 7 maximum skill. So, you know, if you roll 6 dice and 2 come up 8s, and you have a +7 skill, then you scored 2 15s. You got 2 unlikely successes. If the highest thing you roll is a 6, and you get a +5, then the best you can get would be a difficult challenge success. And in most cases, the challenge ratings are fixed. Like, okay, to climb that wall, you need an athletics challenge. You need to score at least a difficult. So, you know, the person rolls, and, you know, if they have like a +6 or +5 or better challenge, 5 or better skill rating, and they're rolling like 6 dice, like, chances are they're going to have at least 1 success. And multiple successes do different things. They reduce the amount of time it takes to do something. They allow you to do it better. In the case of magic, it becomes a more potent effect, you know, the usual. Whereas if someone's trying something that's impossible, as a starting player, they may never be able to score that 18 unless they have an 8 in something. However, if you roll a 10, that allows you to add additional +1 to any die in that pool for that roll. So, like, if you scored a 17, or if you even score if you scored a 17 and you need 18, and you rolled a 10, and achieving that 17, you can give +1 and give yourself a +1, give it 18, and do something that's normally impossible. And that's, you know, it's not common, but it can happen. And combat works a little differently. Combat, it's always your attribute, usually your finesse or your strength, depending what type of, or finesse or your body, depending what type of weapon you're using, against a defense rating, which is effectively armor class. It's a base body rating based on your agility, or your finesse, sorry. Based on your finesse, then you get some additional points if you have armor. And it's usually anywhere on an average target from 10 to 15. It's kind of an average defense rating. So generally, unless you have a weapon skill or unarmed combat skill of something like 5, your chance to hit a 15, for example, would be, or we'll say a 12. If you're trying to hit someone with a defense rating of 12, and you have a +5, a 5 on your weapon skill, You have a roughly 50% chance to hit that person all the time. Now, what's interesting, and every success scores damage, scores more damage. So that's how that works. And then there's a chance for the person to roll a body resistance to soak damage. So that's kind of how the system works. And it was interesting because in writing up a formal scenario, especially one that's not combat, like the last playtest I ran, there was a lot of like spotting and perception and combat and overland action, like horsemanship, and I got to test a lot of that stuff. This time I'm testing a lot of the social challenge stuff, and it's interesting having to quantify that because as we know, in most of these games, there's very little actual support for social challenging. So I have built in a bit of a system. I built in an opposition system. I got to see it used a little bit last night, but it was interesting. Like say when I went in to, let's see if I can show this without giving away anything to the current group or a future group. I think this is fine because this is very general information about a non-player character. Yeah. So this is actually pretty much right about where the group's at in this scenario. So Salman Ray here is a merchant that they realize they have to find out more about. This isn't really a big secret. This should happen pretty quickly in this scenario. So the way I set it up is they need to have some kind of skill related to the merchant class or to trade. We have one character with acumen, which is kind of a general knowledge of the social structure and social interactions of a particular cultural subset. Nobility, merchants, priests, warriors, police. I mean, we aren't really technically police as we know them, but you know what I mean. Like, it'd be like cop etiquette, right? Like in modern world. If this were set in the modern world, I have like cop etiquette or college student etiquette, right? The social customs. That's what acumen kind of does. And you can use it in terms of, you use it with your mind so that you can figure something out about a situation, or you can use it in a social challenge. Like, I'm trying to figure out how not to offend somebody when I'm talking to them. Make a presence plus acumen and see how you do. So they allowed them to use, if they were actively talking to people and investigating and name dropping, I allowed them to use presence plus whatever acumen was appropriate last night for the most part. Well, so we had Justin's character who has acumen in wealthy, and I said, okay, that can extend into 2 sectors. That can extend into because of his whole character background. He likes to hang out around wealthy people and get their money and their information. So I said, well, okay, this is reflective of when you use this ability, when you use this or use this skill to talk to someone. In this case, he was talking to other merchants trying to find out about this particular merchant because he found out he was a wealthy merchant. So I said, okay, roll your presence plus your acumen. So he had like 6 or 7 presence dice. He's a very social character. So he rolls those and his acumen's high. It's like 7 or 8. So he was able to find out a lot. So they basically were able to get and the way I staged it is, all right, roll your dice. Your baseline's average, which is a 12. And then if you score anything at difficult or unlikely, which would be 15 or 17, you get additional pieces of information. And I've kind of wrote that up in the beginning of the scenario as to how to kind of manage this as an overseer, as a game master. So it's a little bit different of a system than I've employed before, and I had to kind of quantify it. Like how will these skills actually work to get information? And that's why I think writing up this scenario in a formal context, as in something I'm going to publish along with the main book, and then I'm going to run for other people and maybe send out as part of a playtest package. I think that was really useful for me, and that's what I spent a lot of time on Saturday. Was kind of sorting this out. And I had the scenario. I mean, the scenario has been kind of in my head now for months. When I was away overseas, when I would sit down at night, after the family was going to bed or whatever, and I'd just sit downstairs in my little my little basement apartment and do some writing, I wrote this kind of the story of the scenario. But then I had to go in and fill in the details, like how's it all actually going to work. And this was the interesting part, because the first chapter, because it's 2 chapters, so probably 2 chapters, maybe 3. 2 chapters. The first chapter, which is at this point what I have written, is a lot of this. It's a lot of who do I talk to find out information to get to the next step. And so it's a different kind of scenario than search for the secret door and avoid the trap. Though we did have a little bit of that last night, which was kind of fun. It's kind of funny they went instantly into D&D thief mode when trying to get into the warehouse. Just make sure the windows aren't trapped. Windows weren't trapped. The dude, Salomon right here, is the merchant's whose warehouse they were breaking into, and I'll try to find out more information. And again, he's not a trap type of guy. He's a grain merchant and a textile merchant. So he's not worrying about setting traps. It's not, he's kind of like an average person, so a rich average person. So that was an interesting experience in terms. Now here's Seraphus, the gladiator. That's a whole other story. Finding information about Seraphus, which they started with some, but then they had to find out more. And I had like I had like details about the high guard they meet in the beginning, Lubian, who they didn't even get his name. They barely talked to him. So I had this whole little paragraph written, and and the attendants where they start off. And it's always that question. This goes back to the game master overdoing it. I spent most of Friday into Saturday writing this extensive amount. And of course they only touch on maybe 15% of what I have written. But I think that's okay. Because somebody will use it sooner or later. Maybe the next group will sit and talk to the attendants or talk to the guard for 20 minutes. I don't know. Another case last night was Mel's character, who's kind of one of the little sparrows from Game of Thrones. This just post-adolescent street kid who trades information, and she has a little gang that she does it with. And she was observing a guard talking to somebody last night, and she rolled so well on it that I gave her some additional information as to what had been going on in terms of the interactions between the guards and comments that were made that could eventually lead them to a clue. So that was pretty satisfying. It was pretty fun. Everyone seemed to enjoy playing the character. Everyone seemed to enjoy figuring out what their character could do. Haven't had anybody break anything yet. I'm sure it will happen. Something completely unforeseen. I know I've talked a lot, like over the summer when we were working on it, and at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, when I started really doing these again, these threads, I talked a lot about the magic system and just how difficult magic is to balance, and I think I finally got it. I resisted having any kind of level structure for effects for a long time, because I've always felt that was very artificial when designing a magic system, especially in a setting where the characters are supposed to be powerful to start. But the compromise was that your path rating, and yes, I stole this right from the Tremere, from White Wolf, don't tell anybody, though it's pretty obvious if you've ever played Vampire, and then look at my magic structure. You have your form, which is one of your 3 types of magic. Primeval, sorcery, witchcraft, which should be obvious as to kind of how the sorcery is what you think. It's, summoning things and talking to the dead and, casting curses and balefire and all the kinds of things you traditionally attribute to dark wizards. Primeval is your druidic sort of ability, and witchcraft deals with things like divination, healing, disappearing. That's one of the few actual invisibilities in the game. Is witchcraft has kind of a vanish from mind's eye thing, where they literally can just make their entire abode disappear. Valuable for witches, though there isn't really a witch persecution in this culture. Still, people who do things like that tend to not want to be noticed. So, I said that okay, within that you have to pick. You have path points, and you can distribute it among the different types of paths. Pull up the witchcraft document for interesting. I forgot how complicated I made it. Last night we were going through it again. I was like, oh, this is so complicated. Why did I do this? Because it's interesting. Magic is big in this game. I mean, it always is. It's always that thing that takes up your center 60 pages of the book, or 100 pages of the 300-page book. So here's witchcraft. So there's enchantment. Oh, that's right, enchantment, which no one has really played with yet. I think Tom might have tried playing with it early on, or somebody did, but it wasn't really set up properly. Rich cake. It's gonna be Glenvis, basically. Yeah, I tried to envision it, and this I don't ever reference this, of course, but I tried to think of it more like Elvish magic in Tolkien enchantment. Not that you make a +2 sword, but that you take the properties of something and you enhance it dramatically through magic. Evanescence is the vanishing act, is making yourself and other things vanish, and also apports and minor kind of teleportation stuff. Healing, as I said, healing is the big thing that witches, one of the big things witches can do. So we didn't even really start to play with the Zarma so a lot of the witchcraft, they have unique charms that they use to enhance their power, but it's really specific to witchcraft. It does really specific things. And we haven't really put into play yet. Magic's a lot. There's a lot of dedication to being a magician in this game. Not only your points allotment, but also just like your brain power. I mean, it's not quite Ars Magica, but it's getting there, which of course, as everyone knows, is one of my favorite games. Then there's the sight. So the sight is the other main thing witches are known for, and that's what we saw used pretty effectively last night. Scrying, seeing auras, psychic ability, more or less. So witchcraft covers all that kind of stuff. But when you take a magic quick reference guide. I think I have a magic quick reference guide. At least I should. I'll probably define it a little bit better. Also, greetings and welcome for all the friends who've tuned in. I see I've got quite a few viewers lurking, which is great. Say hi or don't say hi, as you prefer. It's good to have you. I joked around last week. It was a pretty anemic. It was my first week back. It was a pretty anemic turnout for most of my chats, and I was like, hey, everybody forgot about me. It's fine. Looks like we're back in power this week. Magic reference. I'll pull up the magic reference. Is this where I actually have? No, it's not where I have what I want. The gifts document. The gifts quick reference document. Let's see. Gifts compiled now. Core rules. I know I had a quick reference document for magic. Gifts, quick descriptions. Here we go. So let me switch over to that. So the way magic works is you choose your form. Let's see if I have this all detailed here. Yeah. So you choose your form. And oh no, see, I don't have a quick breakdown. I guess I should write that up. Because obviously if I'm looking for it now and I don't have it, that means at some point somebody else is going to look for it. you choose your form. Let's say you choose witchcraft. Then you choose. You have a certain number of points to allot in various paths. Starting magicians get, and I think Diana's character was actually shortchanged. I think she only had 3, but she should have 4. So you pick a path, and in that path you get a series of powers or a series of effects you can cast at various levels. And I originally had it set up that you could cast anything at any level. You just had to roll to resist essence loss at the end. That was not effective control because there was literally no reason, especially if it was like a one-off encounter, to not try a really big effect. And if you lose 3 essence, you lose 3 essence. No big deal. You get it back. So what I had to do is say, all right, you have to have a certain path rating to cast a certain level of effect without risk. So let's say you have a 2 in protection. And you want to cast a minor effect. You can cast at a 2 rating, you can cast minor effects pretty much all day long. The only thing you have to do is after you cast it, you have to roll to see if you lose essence. The essence are basically, it's the equivalent of your magic points. If you lose them, if you go down to 0, you can't cast magic. And as you get lower, it becomes easier to lose essence. So if you cast a lot of magic really quick, chances are you're going to start draining your essence and you have to take a break. Wait till your essence comes back, cast more magic. So if you want to go to an average effect, you need at least a 3. Or at a 1 or 2, you could try pushing it. So that's kind of how the magic point system works. And that was my compromise between not checking magic at all, not having magic be a thing that you put an artificial control system on, but then also not having it run rampant. Because in the early play tests, magic was just running rampant. I mean, the magicians would, if they got any kind of initiative, nobody else would even get to act, because the magicians would always, the magic users, the casters would always go for their highest level effect, and it would change the entire battlefield, and it would, kill the whole enemy or mind control everybody or whatever. And I said, yeah, that's too much. I mean, because even though magic is kind of the only thing you can do to start, if you start out with that ability, because of the way the point systems work, still that's like a really big unbalancing for people who don't want to play a magic using character. But I think I'm finally getting it. I think I finally got the balance, because at no point last night was there this kind of willy-nilly, I'll just use magic because I can do it. It's so easy, And magic in this game should be powerful. I want it to be powerful, but we've also now seen that a lot of the gifts that are based on attributes, like superhuman strength, superhuman speed, masterful presence, we're starting to see that those are competing, that they are competing with magic now in terms of effectiveness, in terms of cost effectiveness in points, in terms of effectiveness in the game world. And I think that's pretty good. I think that's a good balance. It was quite satisfying to see that sort of balance achieved. I'm thinking about. I'm gonna look something up, because I last night I have to take a look at her character, but I think Diana actually shorted herself a magic point, shorted herself a path point. You don't want to do that, because you want all the path points you can get. So that's what I got. That's what I got for today. I thought that today would just be like kind of a quick jump in. Maybe do some review how the game went. Talk a little bit about the game went as much as I could, without giving anything away to the players in their upcoming scenario. But it was a good playtest. It was satisfying, and it's not only a playtest. I mean, everybody seems to like it enough. I think it will continue beyond this scenario. This scenario will be probably 10 to 12 hours. It looks like we're playing about 2.5 to 3 hours every other week. So it'll be a while. It's not going to be like, oh, one shot, we're done. Even if we get a 4-hour session at some point, I think we're going to have a pretty solid, pretty robust test of the system. So, anyone else got anything? Anything exciting to share? Any fun gaming news? Any fun non-gaming news? Gaming gossip? I'm looking forward to playing this with everybody. At some point. Here we go. I'm going to look up the gifts right now because I believe we have a character who shortchanged themselves. Tom also realized last night that he had shortchanged a couple attribute points. And when I looked at his character during the week, I was like, this character looks a little thin. I couldn't figure out exactly what it was. Then when he realized last night, I was like, oh, I think we're supposed to actually have an additional few points here. I said, yeah. Now, of course, my rule always remains intact for the first game session or two. Once people see how the game is actually played, and once they see what their characters can do, I'm allowing them to go through and make some changes on the character, even on the fly. Like even last night at one point, Justin was like, "Can I just get rid of this skill that I took, but I'm never actually going to use, and reel out the points?" I was like, just go ahead and do it. It's the first time we're playing this game. The first time he was playing the game ever. And I'm like, there's absolutely no reason to not let someone play the character they want to play. No, you put the points down 3 weeks ago before you played the game. I'm not going to allow you to change it. First 4 points, yeah. I think she only spent 3. I'm gonna have to make sure she has 3. So, anyone got any ideas for this week's Wednesday night chat? Topics they would like to chat about in gaming? Got some topics we've covered previously. I thought about narrowing it down. Like, let's talk about elves. Right? I mean, like, let's talk about elves. What about elves? Do you like elves? Do you dislike elves? That's the kind of thing I was thinking about throwing out for Wednesday this week. I'll think about it. Like I said, I have another little bit of a chaos week of things going on in the morning that are disrupting my scheduling. So we'll see how it goes. All right, friends. I think I'm going to stick to my promise. I'm going to keep this be a little bit of a shorter session for 2 reasons. The first of which is I want to actually get some more writing done on the scenario. And like I said, I'm at the point that if I do that on camera and you see what I'm doing, people who are currently or may want to play this scenario in the future will see spoilers. And we don't want to do that. And secondly, I'll be back tomorrow. I think I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'll be a little more focused. Maybe I'll work on the religion aspects of the game a little bit. Something I haven't really looked at yet. As I said, I kind of briefly mentioned the structure of the belief systems and maybe if they have deities, a couple deities for the various cultures. But I haven't really dug into it. But it did come up a bit last night. Especially because I did introduce members of the priest class, so there was some discussion about, about what the dynamic would be And also depending on what deity you're aligned to. We don't have any kind of cleric class yet. I did have a gift very early on, basically chosen of a deity or gifted or touched by a deity that gave you some abilities associated with that deity, but it just got so big. It got so big for the amount of space and time I had to really devote to it. But obviously, that's the kind of thing I think I'm going to work on coming up. And that's it. That's what I got for today. Satisfying. Come on, have some folks drop in. Finally get it working after having nothing but tech difficulties for the first 5 or 10 minutes, which is not uncommon, as we know. So, from the Tomes, Twitch TV. Also on YouTube as Fox and Board Games and foxandboardgames.com. So I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler as I tune out for some upcoming news. But I do have some playtest slots at a large convention booked. I don't have the details yet, and that's why I'm not going to tell you anymore. But I have some in-person stuff planned for the winter. I think that's going to be really fun. Take a couple of these games out. Maybe this game and maybe the games one of my collaborators is working on. A miniature war game. That could be cool. That we hope to publish through Fox and Board Games. And find us Twitter. Drop by got a little blog up. Nothing that's earth shattering, but I did get some more blog info up at foxandboardgames.com. Twitter and Facebook, you generally know where to find me. Please like, subscribe, and follow. I'm going to do a little bit of writing off camera. Thanks for your support. Yep, no problem. Yeah, it's busy for me too. That's why I have a shorter stream than normal. I figured I'd come on for a little bit. I'd do my thing, talk a little bit about this weekend's game, and I'll pop on tomorrow. Tomorrow might be a little bit later. I should say that now too, because I have a doctor's appointment in the morning. So I think I should be done and back by 11, but it might not be till noon. That's the great thing about doing this, is as long as they keep an approximate schedule. All right. Thanks a lot for tuning in, folks. I appreciate it. It's fun. I enjoy chatting with everybody. And I'll see you all throughout the week. Have a good one.